Tip number 15, you can solo a sound by hitting shift and the pad of the sound. Tip number 16, we know that you can advance your patterns by hitting the plus minus keys like that to advance to another pattern, but you can also type in your pattern. So let's say you're in pattern D2, you can type in D4. Go to D4, or you can type in D6 and you can go to D6. Then you can go back to D2 by typing it in. You don't even have to advance with the plus and minus keys. Tip number 17, if you're in sound mode and you hold the pad, it'll tell you the name of the pad. So this is pretty helpful. So when you use the app on the computer and you name your sounds, you can put the BPM at the end of your sample file. And when you hold the pad, you'll know what the BPM of that particular sample is because it locks in to the end of the name. So if you had a BPM here, or if I had the BPM here, I would see the BPM number right now. So that's how this is useful here. Tip number 18. So we know that shift minus brings the playhead back to the beginning at all times. Anytime you stop the playback and hit minus, shift minus, it'll bring the playhead back to the beginning. But if you hit shift play while the pattern is playing, it'll also bring you back to the beginning in real time. Tip number 19, which is similar to 16, if you have multiple sequences, you have to have more than one sequence for this to work. If you have multiple sequences, you don't have to advance your sequences using the plus and minus. You can also punch your sequences in. Now you're in sequence 2. So if you want to go to sequence 3, you can just go 0, 3. Now you'll go to sequence 3, sequence 4. And then you can go back to sequence 2 if you wanted to by punching it in. Tip 20, velocity steps. If you're in a pattern, you can go to a particular step. Let's adjust that snare on 1, 2, 1. We hold down shift and we turn the orange knob. We can adjust the velocity of that snare. So now the snare is going to play a little lower. Now let's adjust it back. We adjust the snare back to what it should be, or what it was rather. Tip 21, if you're working on a pattern or you're going through samples and you're not sure what the tempo or the BPM is, the KO2 will listen to audio coming into the device and it will tell you the BPM. So let's take, for instance, you hold down sample, tempo, you'll see 2 dots appear on the screen. That means it's listening for audio. And if you're playing something, it got the BPM that quick. 118 is the BPM. And now when you go back and you play, it'll be the tempo of that sample. Tip 22, if we're playing a sample and we want to tap tempo, maybe we prefer to do it that way, get the BPM that way. You can hit the sample and tap the tempo key. And now we know the BPM is 76 BPM. Tip 23, let's talk about tempo range. So the KO2 by default has a range of 60 to 180 BPM. You can go lower to 40 BPMs, or you can go all the way up to 399 BPM. But in order to access those higher or lower numbers, you have to hold down the tempo key. Let me demonstrate. So right now, let's say you're at 60 and you're trying to get a lower BPM, you hold down tempo and you can type in any number between 40 and 60 to get that BPM. So 45, 46, 48, 59 to get that tempo below 60. If you want to go the other way, higher than 180, you have to hold tempo and you type in any tempo between 180 and 399. So you can type in 300, or you can go 350, 365, whatever it is between 180 and 399. If you wanted to do something wild and odd, no problem. You can type it in that way. Tip number 24, tempo values. Sometimes when we're talking about BPMs, we may want a decimal point. Most times we're gonna just use a whole number, 90 BPM, 92 BPM, or 95 BPM. But let's say you had something that was 90.5 BPM. So to do that, you hold down tempo, you hit the dot or the decimal, and you type in 0.5. Now your tempo will be 90.5 BPM. Tip 25, we talked about multiple ways to adjust pitch when you're dealing with the KO2. You can use the fader, you can use the keys, you can do octaves, but you can also adjust your by just going to the sound menu and using the Y knob. And if you notice, when you see it blink like that, you know you're back at your default rate. When you see the circle blink, you know you're back at your default rate. And that's about it for the tips and tricks for the EP-133 KOII. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As I said, some of them you may know, some of them you may not have known. Maybe you forgot some. Either way, I wanted to share this with you guys. But until then, I want you guys to keep creating, stay awesome, stay amazing. And I'm gonna catch you guys in the next video, all right? Until then, take care.